Hello, this is Tony Heller from RealClimateScience.com, setting the record straight about climate. This video is titled 3 Days That Ended the World. It's right there in the news. Scientists link Europe heatwave to human-caused global warming. Europe's heatwave fueled by climate change moves to Greenland. Well, we really messed up. We're all going to burn up if rising sea levels don't drown us first. After all, scientists say so. Of course, these articles almost never tell you who these unnamed scientists are. If they do, it's usually one of about 5 people, like Michael Mann or Catherine Hayhoe. I've determined from reading the press that Michael Mann and Catherine Hayhoe comprise about 97% of the scientists in the world. So let's take a look at this year's heat wave in England. The red line is the official Central England maximum temperature for 2019, and the blue line is the same thing for the year 1976. And you can see it right there, the 3-day heat wave which scientists said was caused by global warming. But if you look a little more carefully, you can see that the rest of the summer in England has actually been quite mild, and that the summer of 1976 was much hotter. In fact, the summer of 1976 averaged about 5 degrees warmer than this summer in central England. And in 1976, the heat wave didn't just last for 3 days, it lasted for 3 months. Carbon dioxide levels were well below 350 parts per million, yet they had a 3-month-long heat wave, which people who remember described as being more like Arizona than England. England came very close to running out of water that summer and had to impose water rationing. So any scientist who tries to link this short spike in 2019 to CO2 levels and ignores the much longer heat wave in 1976 at low CO2 levels is not much of a scientist. More like a propagandist with no self-respect. Now let's look at Paris. The red line in this graph is temperatures during summer 2019, and the blue line is temperatures during summer of 1947. As you can see, the summers were almost identical, even though CO2 levels were very low in 1947. Once again, any scientist who tried to link this narrow spike in 2019 to CO2 levels is totally lacking in any skill or self-respect. That just isn't how serious scientists do science. There is nothing in this temperature record which provides any hint that CO2 has had any impact on temperatures in Paris. If 2019 temperatures were consistently higher than 1947, then maybe they would have an argument, but that's simply not the case with the actual data. Now let's go back a few years ago to this week in the year 2010. Moscow was having an unprecedented heat wave and hit 100 degrees. The press was doing the same trick of claiming that unnamed weather experts blamed it on global warming. No self-respecting weather expert would say something like that, so the press is either just making the story up or keeping them anonymous. Let's look at the 2010 heat wave in Moscow. This graph is all Moscow summer daily maximum temperatures in the GHCN database. GHCN is NOAA's Global Historical Climatology Network. You can see the 2010 heat wave in this spike right here, and there's the day it got over 100 degrees. But if you look at the years after 2010, you can see that they haven't had any more hot summers in Moscow, even as carbon dioxide levels have increased. And this summer is ridiculously cold in Moscow. They're not having a summer at all. Obviously, the heat wave in 2010 had nothing to do with CO2 levels. Climate alarmists are just ambulance chasers, and there's lots of things they don't want you to see. Like the fact that the United States had the coolest January to July on record this year. Temperatures this year have been about 7 degrees cooler than 1934, when CO2 levels were very low. This next graph compares summer temperatures in Missouri during 1936 in the blue and red lines with summer temperatures this year in the yellow line. This summer in Missouri has been an incredible 13 degrees cooler than the summer of 1936. Now let's look at the summer of 1918. There have been no 100-degree temperatures in the Midwest this summer, but during August 1918 they had an incredible 25 days over 100 degrees in the Midwest, topping out at 113 degrees. Weather that hot in the Midwest is completely incomprehensible now. But this was more than a century ago when CO2 levels were very close to 300 parts per million. So if the goal is to demonize carbon dioxide, you certainly can't do it with data or evidence. You have to do it by other means. Temperature data certainly doesn't support the fake claims of climate alarmists. So what they do is they create a fake appeal to authority. It's just like the story of the emperor's new clothes. No one can see clothes on the emperor, but experts said he had them on. And most people are too embarrassed to publicly question the official story of experts, even if the experts don't actually exist. If they existed, the press would probably quote what their names were rather than just saying, "Scientists say." The great physicist Richard Feynman said, "Science is the belief in the ignorance of the experts." Well, the 3-day heat wave in Europe ended, so they had to move their ambulance chasing to somewhere else. And this time they picked Greenland, where they had 3 days of temperatures close to 0 degrees Celsius. But that 3-day heat wave ended and temperatures have dropped back down closer to normal, about minus 20 degrees Celsius at night. Not a lot of melting going on at those temperatures. The Arctic melt season is almost over. There's really only a couple more weeks where there can be any significant melting because the sun is getting too low in the sky. Temperatures will drop below freezing at the North Pole in a week or two, and new ice will start to form. They are already getting snowstorms over the Beaufort and Chukchi Seas north of Alaska. There's still about 6 trillion tons of sea ice in the Arctic, so if they want to get the Arctic ice free, they're going to have to melt about 1 trillion tons of ice per day. They better get their blowtorches out. But no worries, Nobel laureate Al Gore says the Arctic has been ice-free for 5 years already. These people have absolutely no idea what they're talking about. Their goal is to demonize carbon dioxide. If they were actually successful at getting fossil fuels banned, civilization would collapse in a matter of a few days or a few weeks. The sun doesn't shine at night and doesn't shine much in the winter, and there's lots of very cold days when the wind isn't blowing at all. All the arm waving by propagandists is never going to change that. Wind and solar are not reliable sources of energy. They may have days where they can generate a lot of wind and solar power, but when you need energy 24/7, 365 days a year, it just isn't going to work. These people are incapable of thinking through the consequences of their actions. George Orwell said, "So much of left-wing thought is a kind of playing with fire by people who don't even know that fire is hot." Every time the big lie has been used against people, the consequences have always been disastrous. This time won't be any different. Carbon dioxide doesn't threaten us, but people trying to shut off our energy supply certainly do. Visit Toto on the web at realclimatescience.com. He's been pulling back the curtain on junk science, propaganda, and organized crime for a long time.